Before history was written, the ancient Greeks explained life through gods and myths. Thunder was not random, the sea was not silent, death was not an ending without meaning. Each god represented a force of nature, a human fear, or a universal truth. In this video, you will discover how Greek mythology was formed, who the gods truly were, and why these stories shaped Western civilization. This is not a fantasy retelling, this is the history behind the myths. Long before the gods of Greek mythology were given names, temples, and family trees, the world of the ancient Greeks was shaped by uncertainty. Nature was unpredictable, violent at times, and often terrifying. Storms destroyed crops without warning. Earthquakes split the ground open. The sea, which connected islands and cities, could turn deadly in a single afternoon. For the people living in the Aegean world thousands of years ago, none of this felt random, it demanded explanation. Early Greek mythology did not begin as entertainment or literature. It began as a way to understand reality. Before philosophy, before science, and before written history, myth served as a mental framework. It explained why the sky roared, why the seasons changed, and why human life felt fragile and temporary. Every natural force was imagined as intentional, emotional, and alive. The earliest Greeks believed the world itself had a beginning. Not a creation by a single god, but a slow emergence from chaos. This idea is crucial. In Greek thought, chaos was not disorder in the modern sense, it was emptiness, a vast gap where nothing yet had formed. From this void came the first fundamental forces, earth, darkness, desire, and the sky. These were not characters yet, but concepts slowly becoming personalities. As communities formed across mainland Greece, the islands, and the western coast of Anatolia, these ideas evolved differently in each region. A fisherman in the Cyclades did not imagine the sea the same way as a farmer in Thessaly imagined the land. Over time, local stories merged, competed, and blended. Myths were shared orally, passed from elders to children, from travelers to strangers, changing slightly with every retelling. What made Greek mythology unique was not just its gods, but how human they were. Unlike distant, untouchable deities, Greek gods felt familiar. They argued, desired, made mistakes, and held grudges. This reflected how Greeks understood their own lives, governed by forces greater than themselves, yet emotionally relatable. Importantly, mythology also created order. It explained social rules, moral boundaries, and power structures. Kings ruled because the gods allowed it. Justice existed because divine forces demanded balance. Even suffering had meaning, it was often the result of divine will or human arrogance. By the time these myths began to be written down centuries later, they already carried layers of belief, fear, hope, and tradition. They were not invented overnight. They were shaped slowly, by generations who looked at the same sky, the same sea, and the same mountains, and asked the same question. Why is the world the way it is? This question is where Greek mythology truly begins. In Greek mythology, the universe did not begin with a single creator or a divine command. It began with chaos. This word is often misunderstood today. Chaos did not mean confusion or disorder, it meant emptiness, a vast and silent gap where nothing yet had shape, weight, or direction. To the ancient Greeks, chaos was the absence of form, a condition before existence itself learned how to exist. From this emptiness, the first fundamental forces emerged naturally, not intentionally. Gaia, the earth, came into being not as a mother figure at first, but as solid ground, something stable beneath the uncertainty. She represented permanence in a world that felt unpredictable. The sky had not yet formed, the sea had no borders, and time itself was not clearly understood. But with Gaia, the Greeks imagined the first sense of structure. Alongside Gaia appeared Tartarus, not yet a place of punishment, but a deep, distant layer of existence, a realm beneath the world, representing depth, fear, and the unknown. It was the idea that reality had layers, and not all of them were safe or visible. This concept mattered deeply to people who lived near earthquakes, caves, and sudden geological changes. Then came Eros. In early Greek mythology, Eros was not a romantic figure. He represented force, the drive that caused things to move toward one another, combine, and create. Without Eros, the universe would remain static. With him, creation could continue. This idea shows how the Greeks understood life itself, not as planned design, but as attraction, movement, and interaction. Only after these forces existed could more recognizable elements appear. The sky, later known as Uranus, rose above Gaia. Mountains lifted, seas gathered, and the natural world began to resemble something familiar. None of this happened instantly. The myths describe a slow unfolding, reflecting how ancient people experienced change, gradually, across generations. What is important here is that Greek mythology did not try to comfort people by promising order from the start. Instead, it acknowledged uncertainty. The world was born incomplete, unstable, and constantly changing. Humans were not at the center of creation. They arrived later, adapting to forces that were already in motion. This worldview shaped everything that followed. When storms came, they were not punishments, they were expressions of forces older than humanity. When land shifted or crops failed, it was not moral judgment, but imbalance. The earliest myths taught people how to accept instability, not control it. Before gods ruled from Olympus, before names and stories became fixed, the Greek universe was a place still forming itself, much like the societies that believed in it. As Greek mythology evolved, something fundamental changed. The forces that once explained the world in abstract terms began to take on identity. Earth was no longer just ground beneath the feet. The sky was no longer only weather above the head. These elements became beings, with names, relationships, and authority. This shift marked the moment when mythology became a system of gods, not just a story of origins. The earliest gods were not imagined as distant creators. They were understood as active participants in the world. They controlled natural events, influenced human fate, and reacted emotionally to what unfolded below them. To the ancient Greeks, this made perfect sense. Life felt unpredictable not because it was random, but because it was shaped by forces that could change their minds. As these divine figures gained definition, they formed a hierarchy. Some gods represented stability and order, while others embodied chaos, conflict, or transformation. This hierarchy mirrored Greek society itself. Kings ruled cities. Elders held authority. Power was inherited, challenged, and sometimes violently taken. The gods followed the same logic. The most important transition came with the rise of the Olympian gods. Unlike earlier, more elemental deities, the Olympians were imagined as rulers. They lived above the world, on Mount Olympus, separated from humans yet deeply involved in human affairs. From there, they governed nature, justice, war, love, and knowledge. This separation mattered. By placing the gods on a mountain, the Greeks symbolically removed them from daily life while still keeping them close enough to watch. The gods were above, not unreachable. Storms, earthquakes, and victories in battle were signs of their presence. Silence, too, could be a message. Another defining feature of Greek gods was their imperfection. They were powerful, but not all-knowing. Immortal, but not detached. They could be jealous, vengeful, generous, or compassionate. These traits were not flaws in the system, they were the system. Through the gods, the Greeks explored human emotions at a cosmic scale. Importantly, the gods were not abstract moral judges. They did not enforce universal good or evil. Instead, they rewarded loyalty, punished arrogance, and defended their own honor. This reflected a world where survival depended on respect, balance, and knowing one's place. As myths spread and became more structured, each god took on a clearer role. The sky would be ruled by one. The sea by another. Wisdom, war, love, death, all would be governed by specific divine figures. The universe, once undefined, was now organized. And at the center of this divine order stood a god whose authority extended further than all others, a ruler not by creation, but by power. The reign of Zeus was about to begin. Another defining feature of Greek gods was their imperfection. They were powerful, but not all-knowing. Immortal, Zeus did not inherit the universe peacefully. His rise to power was the result of fear, rebellion, and calculated violence. To understand Zeus, one must begin with his father, Cronus, a titan who ruled the cosmos before the Olympians. Cronus feared prophecy, a warning that one of his children would overthrow him, just as he had overthrown his own father. To prevent this, he swallowed his children at birth. Zeus was the only one to escape this fate. His mother, Rhea, hid him on the island of Crete and gave Cronus a stone wrapped in cloth instead. While his siblings remained trapped inside their father, Zeus grew in secret, raised away from power but shaped by its absence. This early separation defined him. Zeus learned patience, strategy, and restraint before ever touching authority. When Zeus reached maturity, he returned. With the help of allies, including the Titanomachy, he forced Cronus to release the swallowed gods. This moment marked the beginning of the Titanomachy, a cosmic war between the Titans and the younger gods. The conflict was not symbolic. It was brutal, prolonged, and destructive. Mountains were torn apart, and the world itself was reshaped by the struggle. Zeus emerged victorious not because he was stronger alone, but because he understood alliance. He freed the Cyclopes, who forged his thunderbolt, a weapon that became his defining symbol. He also released the hundred-handed ones, beings of overwhelming force who turned the tide of war. Power, for Zeus, was never just about strength. It was about control over others who possessed it. After the Titans were defeated, Zeus imprisoned them in Tartarus. This was not mercy, but necessity. Order, once established, had to be enforced. Zeus divided the universe with his brothers. Poseidon received the sea, Hades the underworld, and Zeus claimed the sky. From above, he ruled not just weather, but law, hierarchy, and authority itself. Unlike earlier gods, Zeus did not represent a natural element alone. He represented rule. Kings prayed to him for legitimacy. Judges invoked his name when swearing oaths. Breaking a promise was not merely dishonorable, it was an offense against Zeus. Yet Zeus was not a distant tyrant. He was deeply involved in human affairs, often crossing boundaries between divine and mortal worlds. This involvement would define both his power and his greatest weaknesses. Once Zeus secured power, his rule reshaped both the divine world and human experience. As king of the gods, Zeus became the ultimate authority, but authority did not bring restraint. Zeus was driven by desire as much as by law, and this contradiction defined many of the myths that followed. Zeus took multiple divine partners, but his most enduring relationship was with Hera, his sister and wife. Hera represented marriage, legitimacy, and social order. Together, they embodied the structure of Greek society. Yet their union was deeply unstable. Zeus's infidelities were constant, and Hera's responses were rarely directed at Zeus himself, but at those involved with him. Through his many affairs, Zeus fathered a vast number of gods and heroes. Athena was born from his mind, fully formed and armored, symbolizing wisdom and strategic warfare. Apollo and Artemis, children of the Titaness Leto, represented balance, light and reason alongside wilderness and independence. Dionysus, born of a mortal woman, embodied chaos, pleasure, and loss of control. These relationships were not romantic tales meant to inspire. They were explanations. Greek mythology used Zeus's desires to explain why heroes existed, why some humans were favored, and why suffering often followed divine attention. To be noticed by Zeus was both an honor and a danger. Zeus also played a central role in enforcing justice. He punished arrogance, known as hubris, when mortals overstepped their bounds. Kings who ruled unjustly risked his wrath. Oaths broken in his name were believed to bring disaster. In this way, Zeus was not just a ruler of gods, but a guardian of social balance. Yet Zeus was not purely benevolent. His punishments could be excessive, and his decisions inconsistent. This inconsistency reflected a deep truth in Greek thought: power was not moral by nature. It required balance, negotiation, and consequence. By making Zeus flawed, the Greeks acknowledged something fundamental about authority. Even the highest power could be questioned. Even the ruler of the sky could cause suffering through desire or pride. Zeus was not the end of the mythological story. He was its center, around which all other gods, conflicts, and passions revolved. And through him, the Greek world learned to see power not as perfection, but as responsibility under constant threat of failure. If Zeus ruled from above, Poseidon ruled from below. His domain was not distant or abstract, it was immediate, vast, and dangerous. To the ancient Greeks, the sea was both lifeline and threat. It carried trade, food, and travel, but it could also swallow entire fleets without warning. Poseidon embodied this duality completely. Poseidon was the brother of Zeus, born of Cronus and Rhea, and like Zeus, he was a survivor of his father's fear. After the defeat of the Titans, Poseidon accepted dominion over the sea. But unlike Zeus, his power was never calm. It was restless, emotional, and easily provoked. The Greeks did not imagine Poseidon as a distant ruler, they felt him every time the waves grew violent. His weapon, the trident, was not merely symbolic. It represented control over water, storms, and even the earth itself. Poseidon was also known as the Earth Shaker. Earthquakes were believed to be signs of his anger, caused when he struck the ground with his trident. Coastal cities feared him not only for storms, but for the sudden collapse of land beneath their feet. Poseidon's relationship with Zeus was complex. Though Zeus held supreme authority, Poseidon never fully accepted subordination. He challenged decisions, defied commands, and at times conspired against his brother. This tension reflected a broader Greek understanding of power: authority might be centralized, but force remained distributed. Unlike Zeus, whose rule was tied to law and order, Poseidon's power was tied to emotion. When respected, he could grant safe passage and abundance. When ignored or insulted, his response was merciless. Ships vanished. Shores flooded. Cities paid the price for arrogance. The Greeks believed that rituals and sacrifices were essential to appease Poseidon. Sailors prayed before every voyage. Fishermen offered portions of their catch. Entire cities built temples facing the sea, not to worship beauty, but to acknowledge danger. Poseidon was not evil, but he was unforgiving. The sea did not care for intention, only respect. And through Poseidon, the Greeks learned that nature was not meant to be controlled, only negotiated with. Poseidon's power was not limited to nature. It extended into conflict, rivalry, and desire. Like many Greek gods, Poseidon was driven by emotion, and his emotions often reshaped the world. His anger could last generations. His desire could alter destinies. One of Poseidon's most famous rivalries was with Athena, goddess of wisdom. When the city of Athens sought a divine patron, Poseidon struck the ground and produced a saltwater spring, a symbol of naval power. Athena offered an olive tree, representing peace and prosperity. The city chose Athena. Poseidon never forgave the insult. This myth reflected a deep cultural truth: the sea offered power, but stability often came from restraint. Poseidon's romantic relationships were equally turbulent. He took both divine and mortal lovers, and many of his unions ended in transformation or tragedy. From these relationships came powerful beings, including Theseus, a hero tied to both land and sea, and monstrous figures that symbolized uncontrolled force. Perhaps no story better represents Poseidon's vengeance than that of Odysseus. When Odysseus blinded Poseidon's son, the Cyclops Polyphemus, Poseidon turned the hero's journey into a decade-long struggle. Storms, shipwrecks, and isolation were not random obstacles, they were deliberate acts of punishment. The message was clear: cleverness did not excuse disrespect. Yet Poseidon was not purely destructive. He was also a creator. He was believed to have shaped coastlines, islands, and even horses, creatures associated with speed and power. In this way, Poseidon represented raw energy given form. To the Greeks, Poseidon taught a hard lesson. Strength without wisdom leads to chaos. Emotion without balance brings suffering. The sea could nourish civilizations, but it demanded humility. Poseidon was feared, respected, and never fully trusted. His presence reminded humanity that some forces could never be mastered, only endured. Among the Olympian gods, Hades was the most misunderstood. While Zeus ruled the sky with thunder and Poseidon commanded the sea with rage, Hades governed quietly, and permanently. His domain was not chaos or punishment by default. It was inevitability. Every mortal, regardless of status or virtue, would one day enter his realm. Hades was the eldest son of Cronus and Rhea, yet he did not seek supremacy. When the cosmos was divided after the Titanomachy, Hades accepted the underworld not as a defeat, but as a responsibility. This decision shaped his identity. He was not worshipped with celebration or joy. He was acknowledged with respect and caution. To the ancient Greeks, death was not an enemy to be defeated. It was a boundary to be crossed. Hades embodied that boundary. His realm was structured, ordered, and impartial. Souls were judged not by emotion, but by balance. Heroes and kings entered the underworld just as peasants did. Power meant nothing once life ended. Unlike later religious concepts of hell, the Greek underworld was not a place of constant torment. It was a vast system composed of regions, fields of reward, areas of neutrality, and places of punishment reserved for extreme offenses. Hades did not torture for pleasure. He enforced order. This made Hades terrifying in a different way. He could not be bargained with easily. He did not act from anger or desire. Once something entered his domain, it belonged to him. This absolute finality gave him a unique form of authority, one that even Zeus rarely challenged. Hades' symbols reflected this control. His helmet of invisibility did not grant stealth for mischief, it represented unseen power. His wealth came from beneath the earth, metals, gems, fertile soil, reinforcing the idea that life itself depended on the domain of death. The Greeks rarely spoke his name aloud. Not out of hatred, but out of respect. To acknowledge Hades was to acknowledge mortality. And that truth was heavier than thunder. Despite his reputation, Hades was not devoid of emotion. His most defining relationship was not one of domination, but of love. The story of Persephone reveals a side of Hades that is often overlooked, a god capable of attachment and compromise. Persephone, daughter of Demeter, goddess of agriculture, was taken into the underworld by Hades. This act was not portrayed as a romantic pursuit, but as a claim rooted in ancient customs of marriage and alliance. Yet the consequences of this union reshaped the natural world. Demeter's grief was absolute. Crops failed. The earth grew barren. Humanity faced starvation. For the first time, divine conflict directly threatened the survival of mortals. Zeus was forced to intervene, not as a ruler asserting dominance, but as a mediator restoring balance. The resolution was neither victory nor defeat. Persephone would spend part of the year with Hades, and part with her mother. From this compromise came the seasons. Life would flourish, then retreat. Growth and decay became inseparable. Hades honored this agreement. Unlike Zeus or Poseidon, he did not break his word. His power was defined by consistency. Once balance was established, he upheld it without deviation. This myth reinforced the Greek understanding of death as part of life, not its opposite. The underworld was not an end, it was a phase within a larger cycle. Hades ensured that the cycle remained intact. Through Persephone, Hades became a god of transition rather than punishment. His realm gained meaning beyond fear. It became necessary. The Greeks did not pray to Hades for favors. They acknowledged him in silence. And in that silence, they found acceptance. Hera is not merely the wife of Zeus, she is the institutional backbone of Olympus. In Greek mythology, Hera represents lawful order, legitimacy, and continuity, forces that sustain power rather than seize it. While Zeus embodies raw authority through thunder and dominance, Hera embodies the framework that makes authority acceptable, recognized, and enduring. Without Hera, Olympus would be a court of chaos rather than a ruling order. Born to the Titans Cronus and Rhea, Hera belongs to the original divine generation that survived the fall of the Titans. As both sister and consort to Zeus, her position is inseparable from the very foundation of Olympian rule. After the Titanomachy, when Zeus claimed the sky, Poseidon the sea, and Hades the underworld, Hera did not receive a domain defined by geography. Instead, her dominion was societal and structural: marriage, lineage, royal succession, and social stability. In ancient Greek society, marriage was not a private matter but a sacred institution binding families, cities, and dynasties. Hera's authority reflected this worldview. She was invoked during weddings, childbirth, and dynastic transitions. Her temples, especially those in Argos, Samos, and Olympia, were among the oldest and most revered in Greece. The Heraion of Argos predates many major temples dedicated to Zeus, underscoring how central her cult once was. Hera is not merely the wife of Zeus, she is the institutional backbone of Olympus. In Greek mythology, Hera represents lawful order, legitimacy, and continuity, forces that sustain power rather than seize it. While Zeus embodies raw authority through thunder and dominance, Hera embodies the framework that makes authority acceptable, recognized, and enduring. Without Hera, Olympus would be a court of chaos rather than a ruling order. Born to the Titans Cronus and Rhea, Hera belongs to the original divine generation that survived the fall of the Titans. As both sister and consort to Zeus, her position is inseparable from the very foundation of Olympian rule. After the Titanomachy, when Zeus claimed the sky, Poseidon the sea, and Hades the underworld, Hera did not receive a domain defined by geography. Instead, her dominion was societal and structural: marriage, lineage, royal succession, and social stability. In ancient Greek society, marriage was not a private matter but a sacred institution binding families, cities, and dynasties. Hera's authority reflected this worldview. She was invoked during weddings, childbirth, and dynastic transitions. Her temples, especially those in Argos, Samos, and Olympia, were among the oldest and most revered in Greece. The Heraion of Argos predates many major temples dedicated to Zeus, underscoring how central her cult once was. Hera's authority does not end with marriage, it expands through motherhood, lineage, and political continuity. In Greek mythology, motherhood is not merely biological, it is ideological. Hera governs birth, legitimacy, and inheritance, making her one of the most feared gods among both mortals and immortals. Through her, bloodlines are sanctioned or denied, dynasties are blessed or cursed. Hera is the mother of several Olympian figures, including Ares, Hebe, and Eileithyia. Each child reflects a different aspect of her dominion. Ares embodies the raw, destructive side of conflict, often interpreted as Hera's suppressed fury made manifest. Hebe represents youth and renewal, reinforcing Hera's role in sustaining divine continuity. Eileithyia, goddess of childbirth, directly channels Hera's power over life's entry into the world. Through Eileithyia, Hera could delay or ease births at will, a terrifying ability in an ancient world where childbirth was dangerous and unpredictable. This power over birth is central to Hera's mythological role. She is frequently depicted obstructing the births of Zeus's illegitimate children. When Leto was pregnant with Apollo and Artemis, Hera forbade any land from offering her refuge. Only the floating island of Delos, not bound by earthly law, allowed the birth to occur. This act reveals Hera's power extending beyond punishment into jurisdiction. She controls who is allowed to be born into the divine order. Hera's influence over marriage was equally absolute. In ancient Greece, marriage defined social legitimacy. Children born outside Hera's sanction were vulnerable to divine hostility. This belief reinforced societal norms, embedding Hera's authority into everyday life. Queens and noble women prayed to Hera not for love, but for status, protection, and recognition. The Trojan War further exposes Hera's strategic intelligence. Unlike Ares, who relished chaos, or Aphrodite, who acted from passion, Hera operated with long-term objectives. She supported the Greek coalition not only out of resentment toward Paris but because Troy represented a challenge to divine hierarchy. Its kings had offended multiple gods, and Hera saw its destruction as necessary to restore cosmic order. Throughout the war, she manipulated events indirectly, pressuring Zeus, deceiving him when necessary, and coordinating with Athena. Hera does not fight on the battlefield, she controls the conditions under which battles become inevitable. Despite her power, Hera's relationship with Zeus is not one of submission. Their marriage is a political alliance sustained by conflict. Hera frequently defies Zeus, challenges his decisions, and even participates in conspiracies against him. In one myth, she aids other gods in temporarily binding Zeus, an act that underscores her confidence and influence. Though Zeus ultimately reasserts control, Hera is never stripped of her status. Their relationship reflects a balance of force and legitimacy. Authority cannot function without recognition. Hera's fearsome reputation arises precisely because she represents consequences. She does not forgive easily, because forgiveness undermines order. Where Zeus embodies possibility, Hera embodies permanence. Where Zeus disrupts, Hera stabilizes, sometimes cruelly, often relentlessly. In the Olympian system, Hera ensures that power has structure, lineage has meaning, and rule has continuity. Without her, Olympus would collapse into competing impulses. With her, the divine order endures, unyielding, watchful, and eternal. Athena represents a radically different form of power within Greek mythology, power exercised through intellect, foresight, and discipline rather than raw force. Unlike Ares, whose violence is impulsive and destructive, Athena governs strategic warfare, law, craftsmanship, and rational order. She embodies the idea that true dominance is achieved not by overwhelming strength, but by superior understanding. Athena's origin is one of the most symbolically charged myths in Greek tradition. She is born not from a womb, but from the mind of Zeus. According to myth, Zeus swallowed Metis, the Titaness of wisdom, fearing a prophecy that her child would surpass him. Later, tormented by unbearable pain, Zeus split his own skull open, and Athena emerged fully grown, fully armored, and already prepared for battle. This birth establishes Athena as a god of intellect incarnate, wisdom given physical form. Because Athena is born directly from Zeus, she is uniquely aligned with his authority. She does not challenge his rule, she refines it. Athena becomes Zeus's most trusted advisor, often acting as an extension of his will. Where Zeus decides, Athena calculates. Where Zeus commands, Athena implements. This relationship makes her one of the most politically powerful figures on Olympus. Athena's domain extends far beyond war. She is the patron of cities, law, reason, and civilization itself. Athens, named in her honor, represents the ideal of ordered society under rational governance. Unlike gods who rule over natural forces, Athena governs human systems, politics, architecture, education, and ethical conduct. Her guidance shapes not only battles, but the structures that determine how societies endure long after wars are over. In warfare, Athena does not glorify bloodshed. She teaches tactics, formation, patience, and timing. Heroes favored by Athena, such as Odysseus, are defined not by brute strength, but by intelligence and adaptability. Athena's protection of Odysseus during the Trojan War and his long journey home illustrates her preference for mental endurance over physical dominance. Athena is also deeply associated with craftsmanship and technology. She is the inventor of tools, weapons, and weaving. These associations emphasize her role as a civilizing force. The myth of Athena and Arachne demonstrates this clearly, when Arachne challenges Athena to a weaving contest, Athena does not destroy her out of rage but punishes her hubris to reinforce cosmic hierarchy. Skill is respected, but only when paired with humility and respect for divine order. Unlike many Olympian gods, Athena remains a virgin deity, earning the title Parthenos. This is not a symbol of weakness or denial, but of independence. Athena is not bound by marriage, desire, or lineage. Her loyalty is to principle and structure rather than personal attachment. This autonomy allows her to act impartially, making her an ideal guardian of justice and rational judgment. Athena's iconography reinforces her identity. She is depicted wearing armor, carrying a spear and shield, often bearing the head of Medusa. Her sacred symbols, the owl, the olive tree, and the aegis, represent wisdom, peace, and protection. The olive tree, gifted to Athens, symbolizes sustainable prosperity over conquest, reinforcing Athena's long-term vision. Among the Olympians, Athena stands as the embodiment of controlled power. She proves that dominance does not require chaos, that strength without intelligence is fragile, and that civilizations rise not through conquest alone, but through disciplined thought. Athena's true influence becomes most visible during moments of crisis, when brute force alone proves insufficient. Nowhere is this clearer than in her role during the Trojan War. While many gods intervened emotionally or impulsively, Athena acted with long-term consequences in mind. She supported the Greek forces not because of loyalty alone, but because Troy symbolized a rejection of divine hierarchy and rational order. The judgment of Paris was not merely an insult, it was a dangerous precedent that elevated desire above wisdom. Throughout the war, Athena intervened selectively. She guided commanders, influenced tactical decisions, and restrained chaos rather than encouraging it. In contrast to Ares, who charged into battle driven by bloodlust, Athena appeared only when calculation mattered. She favored discipline, formation, and restraint, reinforcing the idea that war should serve structure, not destroy it. Athena's rivalry with Ares defines one of the most important philosophical divisions in Greek mythology, violence versus strategy. Ares represents uncontrolled aggression, the kind of warfare that consumes both victor and victim. Athena represents warfare as an extension of order, used sparingly, strategically, and decisively. Their clashes are not merely physical, they are ideological. When Athena defeats Ares, mythology asserts that civilization must prevail over chaos. Athena's involvement in justice extends beyond the battlefield. In the myth of Orestes, she plays a foundational role in the creation of lawful trial systems. After Orestes kills his mother Clytemnestra to avenge his father, he is pursued by the Furies, ancient embodiments of primal vengeance. Athena intervenes, halting the cycle of bloodshed by establishing a court of law. This act marks the transition from revenge-based justice to institutional judgment, a critical moment in mythological history. Athena casts the deciding vote, favoring reason over instinct. This myth illustrates Athena's greatest contribution, the replacement of emotional reaction with structured decision-making. She does not deny violence entirely, she contains it. She does not erase conflict, she channels it. In this sense, Athena becomes the divine architect of civilization itself. Athena's symbols reinforce this role. The owl represents insight in darkness. The olive tree symbolizes peace born from wisdom rather than conquest. The aegis, bearing Medusa's head, reflects her ability to weaponize fear without surrendering to it. Even her virginity symbolizes autonomy, she is not bound by desire, lineage, or emotional dependency. Unlike gods whose power wanes with shifting belief systems, Athena remains relevant because she governs systems rather than sensations. Strategy, law, craftsmanship, and rational governance are timeless. Athena's myths do not describe a lost age, they outline a framework for sustainable power. In Greek mythology, Athena stands as proof that civilization is not the absence of conflict, but the mastery of it. Ares represents the most dangerous and least respected form of power in Greek mythology, violence without purpose. Unlike Athena, who embodies strategy and discipline, Ares governs chaos, rage, and the raw instinct to destroy. He is the god of war, but not of victory, honor, or justice. Instead, he personifies the terror, confusion, and suffering that accompany conflict when reason collapses. Born to Zeus and Hera, Ares is fully Olympian by blood, yet deeply alienated within Olympus. Despite his divine lineage, he is often portrayed as impulsive, reckless, and emotionally volatile. Ancient Greek myths consistently depict Ares as disliked, even by his own parents. Zeus openly condemns him, calling him the most hateful of the gods, not because Ares is weak, but because his power lacks restraint. Ares does not plan battles, he rushes into them. He delights in the clash of weapons, the screams of the wounded, and the smell of blood. His presence on the battlefield does not guarantee victory, only devastation. Where Ares walks, formations break, discipline dissolves, and violence escalates beyond control. In myth, this form of warfare is presented not as heroic, but as destructive to both sides. This portrayal reflects how ancient Greeks viewed war itself. They feared war's chaos more than they admired its glory. Ares embodies that fear. He is often accompanied by his sons Phobos, fear, and Deimos, terror, who spread panic among soldiers. Unlike Athena, who inspires confidence and clarity, Ares overwhelms the mind, reducing warriors to instinct and impulse. Ares' failures are as significant as his aggression. He is repeatedly wounded, humiliated, or outmaneuvered, often by Athena. During the Trojan War, when Ares intervenes directly, he is struck down by Athena with ease. This is not merely a physical defeat, it is a symbolic rejection of uncontrolled violence. Mythology consistently reinforces the idea that brute force without intelligence is inferior. Despite his flaws, Ares was still worshipped, especially in regions that valued martial strength, such as Thrace. However, his cult was limited compared to other Olympians. Temples dedicated to Ares were rare, and his rituals emphasized appeasement rather than reverence. People prayed not for Ares' favor, but for his absence. Ares' existence within Olympus serves a critical narrative purpose. He represents what happens when power is divorced from wisdom. He is not evil in a moral sense, he is inevitable. Conflict exists, violence occurs, and fear spreads, whether sanctioned or not. Ares is the acknowledgement of war's darkest reality. In Greek mythology, Ares is not the war to be celebrated. He is the war to be survived. Ares' mythology does not end on the battlefield. His personal life further reinforces his role as a god ruled by impulse rather than control. His most famous relationship is with Aphrodite, the goddess of love and desire. This union symbolizes the volatile connection between passion and violence, desire that lacks restraint becomes destructive. The affair between Ares and Aphrodite is exposed by Hephaestus, Aphrodite's husband, who traps them in an unbreakable net and displays them before the other gods. This public humiliation is crucial to Ares' mythological identity. Unlike Zeus, whose infidelities go largely unpunished, Ares is mocked and diminished. His lack of political power and strategic intelligence leaves him vulnerable, not just in battle, but in society. This episode reinforces a recurring theme: strength without status is fragile. Ares is powerful, yet constantly outmaneuvered by gods who understand structure, craft, or diplomacy. Hephaestus, physically imperfect but intellectually superior, defeats Ares without lifting a weapon. Ares also fathers many violent figures, warriors, monsters, and chaotic beings. Unlike Athena's favored heroes, who often restore order, Ares' offspring amplify destruction. Even so, mythology does not portray Ares as entirely negative. His presence acknowledges an uncomfortable truth: war is not always rational, justifiable, or noble. Sometimes it is driven purely by emotion. The Greeks did not romanticize Ares. They feared him, distrusted him, and kept him at a distance. This contrasts sharply with later cultures that glorified conquest. Greek myth insists that unchecked violence corrodes both victor and victim. Ares survives every defeat, but he never evolves. In Olympus, Ares is tolerated, not respected. He is necessary, but never central. His role is to remind gods and mortals alike of what happens when power operates without foresight. Ares teaches no lessons of heroism, only warnings. Apollo represents a form of power fundamentally different from both Ares' brutality and Athena's strategic restraint. He is the god of clarity, harmony, and cosmic balance. Where other gods impose order through force or law, Apollo imposes it through illumination, by revealing truth, exposing falsehood, and aligning the world with divine reason. Apollo is the son of Zeus and Leto, and the twin brother of Artemis. His birth itself reflects conflict and inevitability. Hera, jealous of Zeus's infidelity, forbade Leto from giving birth anywhere on solid land. Only the floating island of Delos, unclaimed, unstable, and outside Hera's jurisdiction, allowed Apollo to be born. This origin establishes Apollo as a god who emerges where rigid authority fails, a divine force born beyond conventional boundaries. From the moment of his birth, Apollo is associated with light, not merely sunlight, but intellectual illumination. He governs prophecy, music, medicine, poetry, and rational thought. These domains are not random, they represent systems that impose structure on chaos. Music orders sound. Medicine orders the body. Prophecy orders uncertainty. Apollo's power lies in transforming confusion into coherence. Apollo's prophetic authority centers on the Oracle of Delphi, the most influential religious institution in ancient Greece. Kings, generals, and city-states sought Apollo's guidance before wars, colonization, and political decisions. Unlike gods who issued commands, Apollo spoke in riddles. His prophecies required interpretation, emphasizing that truth is rarely simple. The famous Delphic maxim, "Know thyself," encapsulates Apollo's philosophy. Self-awareness is the foundation of wisdom. Yet Apollo is not a passive god of reflection. He is also a force of swift, decisive punishment. When order is violated, Apollo responds with precision rather than chaos. He sends plagues not out of rage, but as corrections, measured responses to imbalance. In the Iliad, Apollo punishes the Greeks with disease for dishonoring his priest, demonstrating his role as an enforcer of moral and religious boundaries. Apollo's mastery of music further defines his nature. As the leader of the Muses, he governs artistic expression as a disciplined craft rather than uncontrolled emotion. Music, under Apollo, becomes a tool for harmony, education, and divine alignment. This contrasts sharply with Dionysian chaos, which Apollo both opposes and complements. Apollo is also a god of beauty, but not indulgence. His ideal form represents proportion, symmetry, and restraint. However, his romantic relationships often end tragically. Figures like Daphne and Hyacinthus illustrate Apollo's inability to control desire, suggesting that even gods of reason struggle against emotional excess. These myths serve as cautionary tales. Intellect without emotional balance can still destroy. Apollo's power is therefore dual. He illuminates and heals, but he also judges and punishes. He does not dominate through fear, but through inevitability. Truth revealed cannot be undone. In Greek mythology, Apollo represents the belief that civilization depends not only on strength or wisdom, but on clarity, the courage to face reality as it is. Apollo's authority reaches its most formidable expression not in prophecy or music, but in judgment. Unlike Zeus, whose punishments are overwhelming, or Hera, whose retribution is prolonged, Apollo's corrections are surgical. He acts when boundaries are violated, moral, religious, or cosmic, and his response is exact. In the Iliad, Apollo unleashes plague upon the Greek army after Agamemnon dishonors his priest. The disease spreads silently, indiscriminately, until order is restored. This myth reinforces Apollo's role as the guardian of sacred respect. His power does not seek spectacle, it enforces consequence. Apollo's relationship with prophecy further demonstrates the burden of truth. Those who receive his visions often misunderstand them. Cassandra, cursed to speak truth without being believed, represents the tragedy of knowledge without influence. Apollo's gift of foresight becomes a curse when human pride refuses humility. This reflects a core principle of Apollo's mythology: truth alone is not enough, wisdom requires acceptance. Apollo's romantic myths underscore his internal contradictions. Daphne's transformation into a laurel tree, Hyacinthus' death, and Chiron's betrayal all reveal Apollo's struggle to reconcile reason with desire. When emotion overrides restraint, destruction follows. These stories serve not to humanize Apollo, but to warn mortals that even divine clarity has limits. Apollo's opposition to Dionysus defines another central tension in Greek thought: order versus ecstasy. Apollo represents structure, discipline, and self-control. Dionysus represents liberation, chaos, and emotional release. Greek culture did not choose between them, it balanced them. Apollo's presence ensures that freedom does not dissolve into madness. Apollo's enduring legacy lies in his influence on philosophy and ethics. He embodies the belief that enlightenment carries responsibility. To see clearly is to bear the weight of consequence. His myths do not comfort, they instruct. Apollo does not promise happiness. He promises understanding, and demands accountability. Artemis embodies a form of divine power that exists outside civilization. While gods like Athena and Apollo shape cities, laws, and culture, Artemis governs the untamed world, forests, mountains, animals, and the raw boundary between life and death. She is the goddess of the hunt, wilderness, and virginity, but these titles oversimplify her role. Artemis represents autonomy, self-sufficiency, and the refusal to be possessed. Born to Zeus and Leto, Artemis is the twin sister of Apollo. According to myth, Artemis was born first and immediately assisted her mother in delivering Apollo. This moment establishes her early association with childbirth, paradoxically linking a virgin goddess to the act of birth. Unlike Hera, who governs lawful childbirth within society, Artemis presides over dangerous, liminal births, especially those occurring outside the safety of civilization. Artemis chooses independence from the moment she gains awareness. She asks Zeus for eternal virginity, dominion over wild lands, a bow and arrows, and a band of nymphs to accompany her, free from male authority. Zeus grants her these requests, recognizing that Artemis does not threaten Olympian order because she does not seek control over others. Her power lies in absence from hierarchy, not dominance within it. As goddess of the hunt, Artemis does not kill for pleasure. The hunt represents balance between predator and prey. Artemis punishes excess, those who kill without respect, who disrupt natural equilibrium, or who attempt to dominate nature rather than coexist with it. This principle defines her moral code. She is not gentle, she is precise. Artemis is fiercely protective of her autonomy and her followers. Any violation of her boundaries is met with swift and irreversible punishment. The myth of Actaeon illustrates this clearly. When Actaeon accidentally sees Artemis bathing, she transforms him into a stag, and he is torn apart by his own hunting dogs. The punishment is not sexualized or emotional, it is territorial. Actaeon crossed a boundary that could not be crossed. Similarly, Artemis punishes Niobe for boasting superiority over Leto. Niobe's pride challenges divine balance, and Artemis, alongside Apollo, responds by killing Niobe's children. These myths reinforce Artemis's role as an enforcer of cosmic humility. Nature does not tolerate arrogance. Despite her severity, Artemis is also a protector. Young girls prayed to her before marriage, hunters sought her blessing, and communities honored her to ensure harmony with the land. Her temples often stood on the edges of cities, marking the threshold between human order and natural chaos. Artemis does not represent cruelty, she represents limits. In Greek mythology, the wild is neither good nor evil, it is indifferent. Artemis personifies that indifference. She does not negotiate. She does not forgive. She preserves balance by eliminating disruption. Artemis reminds mortals that not all power seeks worship, and not all gods desire proximity. Unlike Aphrodite, Artemis rejects romantic entanglement entirely. Desire, in her mythology, represents vulnerability. Artemis's autonomy is absolute. She cannot be possessed, persuaded, or subdued. Any attempt to claim her, physically or symbolically, is met with annihilation. This makes Artemis one of the few Olympians entirely immune to manipulation. Her association with the moon further reinforces her symbolism. The moon governs cycles, growth, decay, renewal. Artemis embodies these rhythms. She is present in childbirth and death, beginning and end. She does not intervene to comfort, she oversees transitions. Greek mythology does not soften Artemis's image. She is not benevolent, but she is fair, according to the rules of nature. Mortals do not negotiate with storms, predators, or winter. They adapt. Artemis demands the same humility. In Olympus, Artemis stands apart. She owes nothing, needs nothing, and yields to no one. Her power does not expand, it endures, unchanged, untamed, eternal. Artemis's power is most clearly defined through punishment, not as vengeance, but as enforcement of natural law. Unlike Hera's institutional authority or Apollo's moral clarity, Artemis governs through immediacy. Her response to transgression is swift, final, and non-negotiable. This reflects how the Greeks understood nature itself, indifferent, impartial, and unforgiving. One of Artemis's most revealing myths is her conflict with Agamemnon. After the king kills a sacred deer, Artemis halts the Greek fleet with unnatural winds, preventing them from sailing to Troy. The offense is not accidental, it is symbolic. Agamemnon's act represents arrogance toward the natural order. Artemis demands restitution not through apology, but through sacrifice. Agamemnon must offer his daughter, Iphigenia. This myth underscores Artemis's moral framework. She does not value power, rank, or intention. Balance must be restored, regardless of cost. In some versions, Artemis spares Iphigenia at the last moment, replacing her with a deer and transforming her into a priestess. This variation highlights Artemis's dual nature, uncompromising, yet capable of preservation when equilibrium is achieved. Artemis also governs the transition from youth to adulthood. Young girls participated in rituals honoring Artemis before marriage, symbolically shedding childhood and entering societal roles. In this sense, Artemis presides over liminal states, those moments when identity is not yet fixed. She does not control marriage, she controls the threshold before it. Aphrodite represents one of the most dangerous forces in Greek mythology, desire itself. Unlike Ares, who destroys through violence, or Athena, who controls through intellect, Aphrodite rules through attraction, longing, and emotional compulsion. Her power does not command, it pulls. It bends gods and mortals alike without resistance, reason, or warning. Aphrodite's origin varies across traditions, each reinforcing her uncontrollable nature. In Hesiod's Theogony, she is born from sea foam after Cronus casts Uranus's severed genitals into the ocean. From this act of cosmic violence emerges beauty, desire, and sexual power. This version establishes Aphrodite as older than Olympus itself, a primal force that predates divine order. In Homeric tradition, she is the daughter of Zeus and Dione, integrating her into Olympian hierarchy. In both versions, Aphrodite remains fundamentally untamed. Aphrodite governs love, sexual attraction, fertility, and emotional attachment. But Greek mythology does not romanticize these domains. Love is not portrayed as gentle or moral, it is destabilizing. Aphrodite's influence overrides judgment, loyalty, and even survival instinct. Under her power, gods betray alliances, heroes abandon reason, and entire cities fall. Her most famous role in myth is the judgment of Paris. When Paris is asked to choose the fairest goddess, Aphrodite offers him Helen, the most beautiful mortal woman. This promise ignites the Trojan War. Unlike Athena's offer of wisdom or Hera's offer of power, Aphrodite's gift appeals directly to desire. The war that follows is not accidental, it is the inevitable consequence of elevating passion above order. Aphrodite's romantic relationships further reveal her influence. Her affair with Ares symbolizes the volatile fusion of desire and violence. Together, they produce Phobos and Deimos, fear and terror, suggesting that unchecked passion breeds chaos. Aphrodite does not seek dominance, she seeks response. Her power exists only when others feel compelled. Despite her beauty, Aphrodite is not universally admired among the gods. Hera distrusts her, Athena opposes her, and Zeus uses her strategically rather than reverently. Aphrodite's power cannot build civilizations or enforce laws, but it can destroy them effortlessly. This makes her essential and dangerous. Aphrodite's worship was widespread and deeply emotional. Sailors prayed to her for safe voyages, lovers for union, rulers for legitimacy through lineage. Yet her cult emphasized appeasement rather than devotion. Love, once unleashed, cannot be recalled. Aphrodite teaches a harsh lesson: desire is never neutral. It reshapes destiny whether welcomed or resisted. Aphrodite's power is absolute, but it is not invincible. While she controls desire, she is also bound by it. Unlike Athena or Artemis, Aphrodite cannot remain detached. Her influence makes her both manipulator and participant, subject to the same emotional turbulence she inflicts on others. This vulnerability is evident in her marriage to Hephaestus. Zeus arranges the union to neutralize Aphrodite's disruptive influence, binding beauty to craftsmanship rather than power or passion. Yet the marriage is hollow. Aphrodite's affair with Ares exposes the failure of imposed order over desire. Hephaestus' trap humiliates both lovers publicly, revealing a critical truth: desire loses power when exposed. Aphrodite's involvement in mortal affairs often ends tragically. Her love stories, Adonis, Anchises, Phaedra, rarely conclude peacefully. Love inspires devotion, but it also invites jealousy, obsession, and loss. Aphrodite does not protect her followers from suffering. She creates intensity, not stability. One of the most revealing myths involves Psyche, a mortal woman whose beauty rivals Aphrodite's. Threatened, Aphrodite orders her son Eros to punish Psyche, but he falls in love instead. The trials Psyche endures reveal Aphrodite's cruelty, but also her insecurity. For the first time, Aphrodite confronts a force she cannot dominate: love that grows beyond her control. This myth reframes Aphrodite's power. Desire cannot be monopolized. It evolves, resists, and transforms. Aphrodite's eventual acceptance of Psyche's immortality represents a rare moment of adaptation, acknowledging that love, once created, no longer belongs to its creator. In the Olympian hierarchy, Aphrodite occupies a paradoxical position. She lacks political authority, military power, or moral jurisdiction. Yet no god can ignore her. Zeus may rule the sky, Athena the mind, and Hera the throne, but Aphrodite rules motivation itself. Greek mythology does not celebrate Aphrodite uncritically. It warns that passion unrestrained erodes judgment, loyalty, and order. Yet it also acknowledges that without desire, nothing begins. Love destabilizes, but it also drives creation. Aphrodite endures because desire endures. It cannot be outlawed, reasoned away, or fully controlled. It can only be understood, and respected. Hephaestus represents a form of power rarely glorified in mythology: creation through endurance. Unlike gods who dominate through beauty, violence, or intellect, Hephaestus rules through skill, patience, and labor. He is the god of fire, not the destructive fire of war, but the controlled flame of the forge. His power builds what others merely wield. Hephaestus' origins are marked by rejection. In some myths, he is born to Hera alone, without Zeus, as an act of defiance. In others, he is the son of both Hera and Zeus. Regardless of version, his physical deformity defines his early fate. Ashamed of his imperfection, Hera casts him from Olympus. He falls for days before landing in the sea, where he is raised by sea nymphs. This exile establishes Hephaestus as the only Olympian whose power is forged through suffering rather than inheritance. Unlike gods who command obedience, Hephaestus earns respect through mastery. His forge lies beneath volcanoes, most famously Mount Etna, where he crafts weapons, armor, and divine artifacts of unmatched precision. Zeus' thunderbolts, Athena's armor, Apollo's chariot, and even Pandora herself are products of Hephaestus' skill. Olympus functions because Hephaestus builds what gods rely upon. Hephaestus' craftsmanship reflects intelligence rooted in application rather than abstraction. He does not theorize, he produces. His creations are flawless because they embody function, not appearance. This distinguishes him sharply from Aphrodite, whose beauty inspires desire but lacks permanence. Hephaestus' works endure long after passions fade. Despite his indispensability, Hephaestus remains socially marginalized among the gods. His marriage to Aphrodite is arranged, not chosen, and underscores the disconnect between beauty and labor. Aphrodite's infidelity humiliates him publicly, yet Hephaestus responds not with rage, but with ingenuity, crafting an invisible net to expose the affair. This moment reveals his defining trait: Hephaestus defeats gods without lifting a weapon. Hephaestus' power lies in inevitability. Gods may mock him, but they cannot replace him. His intelligence operates quietly, reshaping outcomes through preparation rather than confrontation. In Greek thought, this elevates craftsmanship to divine status. Creation becomes a form of dominance. Hephaestus also symbolizes technological progress. He invents automatons, self-moving tripods, and mechanical servants, anticipating the concept of engineered intelligence. These myths reflect ancient fascination with innovation and the fear it inspires. Hephaestus is both creator and boundary setter, ensuring technology serves order rather than chaos. In Olympus, Hephaestus occupies a paradoxical role: physically weak, socially isolated, yet structurally indispensable. His power does not demand recognition, it enforces dependence. Despite his indispensability, Hephaestus remains socially marginalized among the gods. His marriage to Aphrodite is arranged, not chosen, and underscores the disconnect between beauty and labor. Aphrodite's infidelity humiliates him publicly, yet Hephaestus responds not with rage, but with ingenuity, crafting an invisible net to expose the affair. This moment reveals his defining trait: Hephaestus defeats gods without lifting a weapon. Hephaestus' mythology challenges the idea that power must be visible. His influence operates behind the scenes, shaping events long before confrontation occurs. While Zeus enforces order and Athena designs strategy, Hephaestus builds the tools that make power executable. His exile permanently alters his relationship with Olympus. Though eventually recalled, Hephaestus never fully belongs. This distance fuels his independence. Unlike gods bound by pride or desire, Hephaestus focuses on mastery. His loyalty is not emotional, it is functional. Olympus depends on him, but he owes Olympus nothing. Hephaestus' technological creations blur the line between divine and mechanical. His automatons move without guidance, anticipating later myths of artificial life. These inventions provoke awe and unease, suggesting that creation itself can rival divine authority. Hephaestus does not seek worship for this power, he seeks perfection. Despite his isolation, Hephaestus is not passive. His exposure of Aphrodite and Ares reasserts dignity through intelligence. The public humiliation reverses traditional power dynamics, beauty and violence collapse under precision and foresight. This moment redefines strength in Greek myth. Hephaestus also crafts Pandora, the first woman, at Zeus' command. This act introduces suffering into the human world, raising complex questions about responsibility. Is Hephaestus culpable for Pandora's consequences, or merely executing divine will? Greek myth leaves this unresolved, reinforcing the tension between creation and consequence. Hephaestus' legacy is endurance. His works survive gods, wars, and ages. Fire burns, metal endures, and craftsmanship remains relevant across civilizations. In this way, Hephaestus represents continuity beyond myth. He is not celebrated for beauty or conquest. He is respected because nothing functions without him. Hermes represents a form of power defined not by dominance, creation, or destruction, but by movement. He is the god of communication, travel, trade, boundaries, and transition. Where other gods rule domains, Hermes rules connections, between gods and mortals, life and death, order and chaos. He exists wherever something passes from one state to another. Hermes is the son of Zeus and Maia, born in a cave on Mount Cyllene. From the moment of his birth, Hermes defies expectations. On the very day he is born, he escapes his cradle, invents the lyre, steals Apollo's cattle, and disguises his tracks to avoid detection. This myth establishes Hermes as a god of cleverness, deception, and innovation, not malicious, but adaptive. Unlike Ares' violence or Athena's discipline, Hermes' intelligence is flexible. He understands rules deeply enough to bend them without breaking the system entirely. When Apollo confronts him over the stolen cattle, Hermes does not fight or submit, he negotiates. He trades the lyre for forgiveness, transforming conflict into exchange. This moment defines Hermes' role in Olympus. He turns confrontation into communication. Hermes governs travel and roads, making him essential to merchants, messengers, and wanderers. In an ancient world where movement was dangerous and slow, Hermes embodied protection against uncertainty. Stone markers called Hermi were placed along roads and borders, symbolizing safe passage and clear boundaries. These markers also emphasized Hermes' dual role. He protects movement, but he also defines limits. As messenger of the gods, Hermes alone moves freely between realms. He delivers Zeus' commands, escorts heroes, and guides souls to the underworld as psychopomp. This role makes Hermes uniquely neutral. He does not judge the dead, he delivers them. He does not enforce punishment, he ensures transition. Hermes understands that movement itself is power. Hermes is also the patron of thieves, not because he endorses crime, but because theft requires intelligence, speed, and timing. Greek mythology frames theft as a test of cleverness rather than morality. Hermes rewards ingenuity, not cruelty. This association reinforces his identity as a god who values skill over strength. Hermes' symbols, the winged sandals, the caduceus, and the traveler's cloak, reflect speed, balance, and mediation. The caduceus, entwined by serpents, symbolizes negotiation and equilibrium rather than force. Hermes resolves conflict not by winning, but by keeping systems in motion. In Olympus, Hermes is indispensable precisely because he does not threaten hierarchy. He connects without challenging. He moves without conquering. His power lies in enabling others to act. Hermes proves that control over movement, of people, information, and souls, is among the most subtle and enduring forms of power. Hermes' most profound role is not as messenger, but as guide of souls. As psychopomp, Hermes escorts the dead from the world of the living to the realm of Hades. This role requires neutrality, precision, and trust. Hermes does not judge the dead, he ensures passage. This reinforces the Greek belief that death is a transition, not a verdict. Hermes' involvement with the underworld distinguishes him from other Olympians. He crosses boundaries others cannot. He moves between Olympus, Earth, and the underworld without resistance. This fluidity makes Hermes essential to cosmic balance. Without him, communication would fracture and order would stagnate. Hermes is also deeply tied to commerce and exchange. Trade in ancient Greece relied on negotiation, trust, and speed, qualities embodied by Hermes. Merchants prayed to him for profit, but also for fair exchange. Hermes does not promise wealth, he promises opportunity. Success depends on how one moves within the system. Hermes' association with language and persuasion further defines his influence. Words, like roads, carry meaning from one place to another. Hermes governs rhetoric, interpretation, and translation. This makes him vital to diplomacy and storytelling alike. Where Athena provides logic, Hermes provides delivery. Hermes' neutrality allows him to operate across conflicts. During wars, he carries messages between enemies. During divine disputes, he mediates. This role prevents escalation. Hermes does not resolve conflict by force, he prevents it from becoming absolute. His relationship with heroes further demonstrates his role as facilitator. He aids Perseus by providing guidance and tools. He assists Odysseus by granting protection against Circe's magic. In each case, Hermes does not fight for the hero, he equips them to act. This reinforces his belief in agency. Hermes' influence on Greek thought is subtle but profound. He represents systems rather than outcomes. Movement, exchange, communication, and transition sustain civilization as much as law or strength. Without Hermes, societies collapse into isolation. In Olympus, Hermes is trusted because he does not hoard power. He circulates it. His presence ensures that no domain becomes stagnant. Hermes teaches that the world does not belong to those who rule it, but to those who can move through it. Demeter embodies the most essential power in Greek mythology, sustenance. While other gods govern abstract forces, authority, desire, intellect, Demeter controls the material condition that determines whether civilization survives at all. She is the goddess of agriculture, grain, fertility of the earth, and the seasonal rhythms that sustain human life. Without Demeter, there is no food, no stability, and no society. Demeter is the daughter of the Titans Cronus and Rhea, and sister to Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. After the Titanomachy, she does not seek dominion through conquest or command. Instead, her influence settles directly into the soil. Demeter's power is quiet but absolute. When the land yields crops, humanity thrives. When it does not, humanity collapses. This gives Demeter a uniquely direct relationship with mortals, unmatched by most Olympians. In Greek thought, agriculture was not merely labor, it was sacred knowledge. Demeter is credited with teaching humans how to cultivate grain, store harvests, and organize communal food systems. These teachings form the foundation of settled life. Nomadism gives way to cities, survival gives way to culture. Demeter's role therefore extends beyond farming into civilization itself. Her central symbols, wheat, barley, and the cornucopia, represent abundance earned through harmony with nature. Demeter does not reward exploitation. Her blessings depend on respect for natural cycles. This relationship defines a moral contract. Humans may survive only if they cooperate with the land rather than dominate it. Demeter's temperament reflects this balance. She is nurturing, but not indulgent. When honored, she ensures prosperity. When neglected or wronged, she withdraws her gifts entirely. This withdrawal is not impulsive, it is systemic. The land withers, seasons fail, and famine spreads. Unlike gods who punish individuals, Demeter punishes entire systems. Her worship was widespread and deeply practical. Farmers, city leaders, and households invoked Demeter before planting and harvest. The Eleusinian Mysteries, her most sacred cult, promised initiates hope beyond death, linking agricultural renewal with spiritual continuity. This connection between grain and rebirth suggests that Demeter governs not only physical nourishment, but existential meaning. Demeter's power reveals a truth central to Greek mythology: civilization is fragile. It depends not on kings or warriors, but on predictable seasons and fertile land. Zeus may rule the sky, but Demeter determines whether humans eat tomorrow. In Olympus, Demeter is not loud, dramatic, or ambitious. She is necessary. Her absence is catastrophic, her presence is invisible. This makes her one of the most feared gods, not because she destroys, but because she can stop sustaining. Demeter's mythology reaches its most powerful expression through loss. Her daughter Persephone, born from her union with Zeus, is abducted by Hades and taken to the underworld. This act is not merely personal tragedy, it is a cosmic violation. Persephone represents continuity, youth, renewal, and the future of fertility. Her removal destabilizes the entire world. Demeter's response is absolute. She withdraws from Olympus and abandons her duties. The earth ceases to produce crops. Fields turn barren. Famine spreads among mortals. This is not an act of revenge, it is consequence. Without Demeter's presence, the system fails. Zeus may command the gods, but even he cannot force crops to grow. Disguised as an old woman, Demeter wanders the mortal world, experiencing human suffering firsthand. This descent into humanity distinguishes her from other Olympians. She does not observe famine from above, she walks among it. Her grief becomes collective. This empathy reinforces her role as the most human-centered of the gods. Eventually, Zeus intervenes, not out of compassion, but necessity. Humanity's extinction would collapse divine worship itself. Negotiations with Hades result in a compromise. Persephone will spend part of the year in the underworld and part on earth. This agreement establishes the seasons. When Persephone returns, Demeter restores fertility, spring and summer arrive. When Persephone descends again, Demeter withdraws, autumn fades into winter. This myth explains seasonal cycles while embedding them with emotional meaning. Agriculture is not mechanical, it is relational. The land responds to connection and loss. Greek mythology frames nature as emotionally reactive, not indifferent. Demeter's acceptance of the compromise reveals her maturity as a goddess. She does not reclaim full control. She allows balance to replace total restoration. This restraint ensures continuity rather than collapse. It also reinforces a central Greek value, endurance through adaptation. The Eleusinian mysteries derive their power from this myth. Initiates learn that death, like winter, is not final. Life returns. Grain rises again. Persephone's cycle becomes a promise that loss is temporary, and renewal inevitable. Demeter's legacy is survival through rhythm. She teaches that abundance cannot be permanent, but famine need not be eternal. Civilization persists by honoring cycles rather than resisting them. In Olympus, Demeter proves that power does not always roar. Sometimes, it waits, and the world waits with it. Dionysus occupies a unique and often misunderstood position within Greek mythology. Unlike the other Olympians, whose authority rests on order, hierarchy, or elemental dominance, Dionysus governs transformation. He is the god of wine, ecstasy, ritual madness, theater, and the dissolution of boundaries, between reason and chaos, mortal and divine, self and collective. Born from Zeus and the mortal woman Semele, Dionysus is the only Olympian with a fully human parent. Semele's death, caused by witnessing Zeus's true divine form, forces Zeus to save the unborn Dionysus by sewing him into his thigh until birth. This unusual gestation marks Dionysus as a god who exists between worlds, never fully belonging to one realm. Dionysus's power does not manifest through armies or storms. It spreads through ritual, music, dance, and intoxication. Wine, his primary symbol, is not merely a drink, it is a sacred substance that alters perception. Through wine, Dionysus grants freedom from rigid social structures, releasing suppressed emotion and instinct. However, this liberation is double-edged. Dionysian ecstasy can heal, but it can also destroy. Those who resist Dionysus, denying ritual, refusing acknowledgement, are often driven into madness. Myths repeatedly show kings and rulers attempting to suppress his cult, only to be undone by the chaos they try to control. Dionysus is closely associated with the Maenads, his frenzied followers who abandon conventional life to participate in ecstatic rites. These rituals dissolve identity. Participants do not act as individuals, but as part of a divine collective. This terrifies structured society, which depends on clear roles and rules. The god's presence challenges a core Greek tension, order versus instinct. While Apollo represents rational harmony, Dionysus embodies emotional truth. Greek culture required both. Theater, born from Dionysian festivals, becomes the space where chaos is safely explored, emotions expressed, and society purified through shared experience. Dionysus does not conquer cities. He enters them slowly, through festivals, music, and altered consciousness. By the time resistance arises, transformation has already begun. Dionysus's myths consistently revolve around resistance. Kings who deny him, Pentheus of Thebes being the most famous, attempt to impose rational order on forces they do not understand. These figures represent authority without flexibility, and Dionysus exposes their fragility. Pentheus refuses to acknowledge Dionysus's divinity and bans his worship. Dionysus responds not with violence, but illusion. He lures Pentheus into spying on the Maenads, disguising him, dissolving his identity. In the ensuing frenzy, Pentheus is torn apart by his own mother, who mistakes him for a wild beast. The lesson is clear: repression breeds catastrophe. Dionysus does not demand obedience, he demands recognition. His worship does not require temples of stone, but participation. To deny Dionysus is to deny a fundamental aspect of human nature: emotion, instinct, and irrationality. In Greek philosophy, Dionysus represents the necessity of controlled chaos. Societies that suppress instinct entirely become brittle. Dionysian ritual allows periodic release, preventing deeper collapse. This is why Dionysus ultimately earns a place on Olympus despite his disruptive nature. Unlike Ares, whose violence is external, Dionysus turns inward. He reveals what already exists beneath the surface. His power is psychological, not physical. This makes him one of the most dangerous gods, not because he destroys cities, but because he reveals truths. His presence reminds both gods and mortals that order alone is insufficient. Without release, structure becomes prison. Hestia represents the opposite extreme of Dionysus. Where Dionysus dissolves boundaries, Hestia preserves them. She is the goddess of the hearth, home, and sacred inner space. Unlike other Olympians, Hestia does not pursue power, conflict, or desire. Her authority is quiet, constant, and foundational. As the eldest daughter of Cronus and Rhea, Hestia predates Zeus's rule. Yet she willingly relinquishes her seat among the Olympians to avoid conflict. This withdrawal is not weakness, it is choice. Hestia becomes the stabilizing force that allows the Olympian order to function without constant rivalry. Every home's hearth belongs to Hestia. Every city's central fire represents her presence. She does not travel, wage war, or seduce. She remains. In a mythological system driven by movement and conquest, Hestia governs continuity. Her role is deeply civic. Before any sacrifice to another god, offerings are first made to Hestia. She anchors ritual. Without her, divine communication lacks foundation. Hestia embodies the idea that civilization depends not only on expansion, but on preservation. While other gods change the world, Hestia keeps it from falling apart. As the stories of the Olympian gods slowly fade into silence, what remains is not thunder, fire, or divine conflict, but meaning. Greek mythology was never merely a collection of fantastical tales meant to entertain. It was a framework through which ancient people tried to understand the world, themselves, and the forces that shaped their lives. Each god embodied something deeply human. Zeus was not only the ruler of the sky, he represented authority, law, and the fragile balance of power. His reign reminded humanity that order must be maintained, yet constantly questioned. Poseidon reflected the unpredictable nature of existence itself, calm one moment, destructive the next. Hades taught acceptance, that death is not evil, but inevitable, and that every ending carries structure and meaning. Athena stood for wisdom born from restraint. Ares showed the chaos of unchecked violence. Apollo embodied reason, clarity, and harmony, while Dionysus revealed the necessity of chaos, emotion, and release. Aphrodite demonstrated the irresistible force of desire, Hephaestus the dignity of labor, Hermes the importance of communication and movement, Artemis independence and balance, Hera loyalty and consequence, Demeter survival and nourishment, and Hestia the quiet power of home and continuity. Together, the Olympians formed a complete map of the human condition. Ancient Greeks did not believe these gods lived solely on Mount Olympus. They believed the gods lived within the world, in storms, in harvests, in war, in love, in family, and in silence. Mythology was not distant, it was intimate. Every ritual, every festival, every prayer was a way of negotiating life's uncertainty. Over time, these gods faded from worship, replaced by new belief systems, philosophies, and sciences. Yet their essence never disappeared. We still speak of Herculean tasks, titanic struggles, and narcissism. We still tell stories where gods resemble us, flawed, powerful, emotional, searching for meaning. Greek mythology endured because it never pretended humans were perfect. It accepted contradiction. It accepted failure. It accepted desire, jealousy, fear, and hope. In doing so, it allowed people to see themselves reflected in the divine, not as beings striving for purity, but as beings striving for understanding. As this journey through the myths comes to rest, imagine the ancient storytellers gathered around firelight, voices low, eyes reflecting flame. These stories were not rushed. They were meant to be heard slowly, remembered quietly, and carried into dreams. Perhaps that is why they still speak to us now. Because even in a modern world of screens and speed, we remain the same at our core, searching for meaning in chaos, comfort in ritual, and stories that help us understand who we are. And so, as the gods return to silence, their lessons remain. Not in temples of stone, but in the human mind. Rest now. The myths will still be here when you wake.